How you guys doing? So I know this says turning the corporate battleship with design, but when thinking about what to talk to you guys about today, I figured this would actually be relevant no matter what, because I gave this version of this talk in Holland a couple of years ago, and I still think it's kind of relevant, and it's you'll tell me after if it's any good there. A lot of my career is spent doing many different things across many different kinds of companies. I actually shipped my first product when I was 20. Way back in 1990. And it was a 3D modeling, rendering, and animation product for the Macintosh. I got to use Photoshop 0.7. I don't know how many people here have ever used Photoshop that early, but I've been doing this for a while. Did a bunch of software back in the days of shrink wrap, you know, when you actually had to go to Macworld and sell. There wasn't this whole online thing. There was no phones. You know, in fact, the Mac 2 had just come out, and we just got color. But in 1995, I've actually been at Twitter for the past year and a month, and I took over as director of the design team about halfway into that process. And as Enrique said, I was at Yahoo and helped the redesign for Yahoo Mail. But after my first 5 years of my career, I'm actually was recruited by Adobe, and that's kind of what my general claim to fame is I like to think of it as. This is the Photoshop splash screen. Oh, it's really hard to read. Oh, it's a bummer. My name's right there. Ages ago. So I was the first interface designer at Adobe, and I know they actually had to put the word interface designer in the HR books because it didn't exist. So I get that claim to fame, even though design and interface design had been in the valley for a while. Started the design team there, worked on Photoshop personally, worked on Illustrator personally, and InDesign, and kind of developed the strategy for the Creative Suite. Started the design team, built the design team up. That was my first experience being young and being a manager and going from a startup that I started with some friends of mine, 5 guys right out of college. Well, I dropped out of college, they finished. To being a 2,000 person company and trying to figure out how the hell this thing works, and also being young, passionate, and very loud and obnoxious sometimes, learning how to do the management thing. And then I took a break and went and did the whole web stuff, because in 2000, you guys all remember, 1997 to 2000 in this area was nuts, to say the least. Batshit crazy, quite frankly. Ryan's not here. Ryan was sitting here a second ago. I was gonna give him a shout out. Ryan, your partner here. When I left Adobe, I grabbed Ryan and went to a company. He's actually got me to learn HTML, which was good. That's why I left Adobe. I felt like I was getting stagnant. Did a couple of internet startup things. Went back to Adobe to do Lightroom, which was great. So I did the internet startup thing, so I was in the space I think a lot of you guys are probably in. Went back to Adobe to do Lightroom, back in the corporate culture, and then I decided to do my own studio. So I actually went through the track of having to deal with literally telling people what to do, because we had to get paid for it, and I couldn't pay their checks if they didn't do the job right for all these big clients we had. Then I went to Yahoo, and then I'm at Twitter. So I've got a nice range of things that I've seen, and this talk is kind of about the things that I've learned across the board in that regard, the things that I feel like have held true, for lack of a better way of saying that. So I'm just going to step right into this. The first one is about pictures. This is a tricky one because it can get you into trouble sometimes, but it's still something I have found to hold true. If at all humanly possible, everything that I've seen, every project that I've seen get started for real, has always started with either myself on the design side of the fence or somebody actually drawing out the concept, even if it's a rough concept. You know, this holds true for movie studios and people making movies. They storyboard, they make stuff. And so for me, it always starts with pictures. And part of it is because I feel like part of the thing, especially in a corporate culture, the bigger culture, you missed me calling you out. Oh, sorry. I was thanking you for teaching me HTML. Oh. Especially in corporate cultures, you know, a lot of times you run into these things where, you know, you got to excite the imagination of the people who run the thing. Point of fact here, this screenshot's a little hard to see in the background, but this is actually one of the screenshots that I still have that hopefully the Adobe lawyers will never know that I have, so you guys will be quiet about it, because it's supposed to be on the Adobe servers, not on my machine at home. This is, exactly, right? This is the old version of Illustrator, and this was a screenshot I started doing. The bottom part was the concept of how to make Illustrator work and behave more like Photoshop. hadn't been thought through, wasn't really, fully vetted out. It was just like, okay, let's use some tab palettes. Let's figure out how to move some of the tools around. We know some of the icons were different. What do we start making the labels more similar? It was a concept. I actually did 3 or 4 of these, one for Photoshop, one for Illustrator, and one for PageMaker at the time, which later became InDesign. Those 3 screenshots bought me the next 5 years. So I had 5 years to figure out how to actually do the Creative Suite. But when I showed the concept, it suddenly, the executives at Adobe were like, oh, of course, this is where we need to go. The trick to all this, where it gets you into trouble, is that this is not the final version. This was just an idea. So you got to be careful, because sometimes people get married to these things, and that can get you into trouble. However, the reason why I say this is, the reason why pictures are a big deal, in my opinion, is because once you sell your idea, they also give you kind of accountability for your ideas. They make you have to, execute towards that idea. And in my opinion, whether you're a CEO with getting money from a VC, or you're a designer in a job, the people who actually write the checks, they deserve something. They deserve you to take some time and effort to show them a concept, to draw it out. At whatever fidelity you want to, by the way. You could just draw a sketch if you want to. But in my opinion, they deserve pictures. More importantly, pictures, if you've done them right, they're an instant hit. I mean, you can process them instantly. And that also gives you some credibility as well at the same time. If you don't execute after all that, you've kind of wasted all of that good fortune. But one of the first things that I've felt in this job is pictures, and that they're just extremely valuable. You just can't get away from them. Early renderings, to my point, will never look like the final designs. And if they do, then you're doing it wrong. So this is the James Dyson vacuum cleaner. I don't know if you guys know who James Dyson is. I think he's a great designer. He's an engineer designer. And for the record, great engineering is great design, and great design is great engineering, kind of thing. So he's one of the guys that exemplifies that. Does anybody know how many different versions of the vacuum cleaner he went through before he finally got the one that he liked? 5,200 something? He was building different versions almost, he was like building 2 or 3 versions a day. I have kind of internalized this over my career. I kind of get it personally, but I always forget sometimes it's hard to remember. When you show somebody these pictures, you also have to remember that it's not going to be anything like it when we get to the end. So you got to make sure the people that you show the pictures to don't get like hung up on them, don't get stuck on them. You yourself can't get stuck on them. But those early pictures are what's going to kick it off for you, in my opinion. Does that make sense? So yeah, if you ever want to look up the design study of the Dyson vacuum cleaner, it's fascinating. He's an amazing guy. So that's the first kind of principle I felt like has resonated for me and has done me some good, is knowing that pictures are as a designer, is one of your best friends. The second one, this applies to startups as well as corporations. It's more problematic, but it's busy work. And I feel like I've gotten really good at this lately, now being more of a manager these days, and I don't think I've opened up Photoshop myself in like 6 months, which is kind of a sad thing. Although I think that the design team at Twitter will probably tell you that's a good thing. Busy work. You have to eliminate busy work in everything you do. And so this kind of comes to deliverables that these 2 guys, Andrew and Jason, were talking to a little bit as well too. Busy work, in my definition of the term, is that a design deliverable that never appears in the final product. Busy work is needed to a certain degree, but you should eliminate it as much as humanly possible. So one of the kinds of busy work that used to happen in the 90s and even through the aughts and stuff like that, it was redlining. You'd make these screenshots, these gorgeous screenshots, and the designers would like take all this time and draw all these like lined this is like, this outer border is C2, 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 and the font is white and all that stuff. Just code it. Good Lord. In fact, if you code it into a prototype, you can take that stuff and you can drop in your main product. You've got 2 things. One, the designer gets more control over what they want to do, so they don't have to go to engineer and say, hey, it's actually FFF, not like E8, E8, E8. Engineers are going like, who really cares? And you get stuff that goes in the final product. But one of the things you got to try to do is, as much as humanly possible, anything that you do from a design point of view is eliminate busy work. Busy work is process, capital P process stuff. And it can really, really get in the way. If you have to have busy work, in my opinion, you want to, account for that in a job role and pay for it. So at Adobe, we had specs. We had to write all these specs because that was the big deal. You had to actually write the technical spec for every single feature. It was nuts. So I convinced the folks in charge there to let me hire 5 tech writers. They would do the busy work. We paid for it. That way the designers can stay focused on what they were doing. Busy work kills the design process. It's a great photo of, I couldn't find the Raiders of the Lost Ark image. That was what I was actually looking for, but this warehouse. Design deliverables must live as long as possible to nurture iteration. So to that point, when you do have to have design deliverables, things like the use cases and the stories that Jason just showed, which I actually do use a lot myself, you got to make sure that they actually are used. They're not just written once and thrown away. That they, you review them all the time. They're actually part of the living process, and they got to exist through the entirety of the process as much as possible. The ones that don't, the ones that are one-offs, probably a candidate for not needing to be done at all. There's all kinds of things like that. I don't want to say too much about that, but I'd probably take some questions after about some examples. But in my opinion, busy work will kill your design process, and you have to work to eliminate it. One way you kind of know that you've got some things that are busy work is when this problem occurs. So out of sight is out of mind. If no one can find the work, then it might as well not exist. Now, I'm struggling with this at Twitter. I struggled with it at Yahoo. Struggled with it at Adobe. Didn't struggle with it at my studio because we didn't worry about it this much. Wikis. I don't get it. Do you guys use wikis? Can I ask why? Why do you use a wiki?
So people know where to find it, I guess.
Do they know where to find it?
Yeah, I mean, our team is, it's probably about 12 engineers and product managers, so it's small. It's small enough that it works.
A little bit better. Anybody in a slightly larger place? Yeah?
So we have 30 people, 30 engineers and designers. We use wikis because there's no versioning.
Okay, so that's a different problem. I can get that. We have wikis where people literally dump notes in, and they're never read ever again. And people will do design specs in wikis. And then I have to have people come over to me and say, where's this thing? Or I go to somebody else and say, where's the spec for this? And they're like, oh, it's in the wiki. Where? Well, and I actually watch them. They'll try to search for it and they'll try to find it themselves. They've got so many things they can't bookmark it. It's like lost in the maze of data. Those kind of things just drive me nuts. If you have to have them, you have to also build the tools to make them exposed. So at Twitter, one of the things we're building right now, which I'm happy with, is we're building the design server. And the design server has going to have things, different functions. Where you find our prototypes, it'll be where you find the research documentation. Research is actually a really big problem for this one. You get all these research folks doing this amazing amount of work. They go out into the field, they write all these great notes, they get all this good data, and most companies dump them to a place where nobody ever finds them. At Yahoo, there was all these amazing research being done. Nobody could find it. It was all dumped into a document wiki. You got to really find a way to build the tools to expose those things and actually bring them back into part of the process. That stuff just kills design, kills team, kills morale, and makes the whole thing worse in the end. So it's not that you shouldn't do it, but if you can't find it, might as well not be there. Same goes true for screenshots and all the kind of other work you do. So first thing was pictures. Second thing was busy work. Pictures excite the imagination. I think they create accountability. People deserve them. You should try to do them as much as you can. Eliminate busy work. And this one is going to have some counterintuitive points. And I'll be happy to hear if you guys actually agree with this or not, because you probably will disagree. Collaboration is a big buzzword. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody needs to do it. Collaboration is a big part of the design process. This one is about whiteboards. And I'm going to give you guys a personal pet peeve of mine here in the Valley with all you startups. If you're in a startup, I hope you can start to foster the culture that as you become a bigger company and you get to 1,000 people and you're making all this kind of money, that you don't forget this one. It drives me bananas. Most of these open offices are fine. They're great. but you get all these like cubicles of desks. I walk into these companies, and we have this problem at Twitter, and we're moving to this new building, thank goodness, where I'm having some things adjusted. But like, where are the whiteboards? Oh, they're in the conference rooms. Okay, so I have to get out of my desk and gather a bunch of people and schedule the room and go sit in a room and do real work. All of these layouts and startups, the layouts of these offices for all the startups that I see are optimized for engineers, which is great. Engineers need to code, they need to sit at a computer, they need to work. Designers need stuff like this. And if you want to design products with engineers and designers and product people and business people and sales people and research folks, you need to give them an environment where they can actually do stuff. And do stuff does not mean doing stuff on their damn computer. The computer's a tool. The computer is not the work. At the end of the day, all these things are tools. These are more than tools because it's the environment. And you get stuff out in the open, things are on the walls, people see them all the time, like the work wall, that kind of thing. You have to do that. So there's this company called Idea Paint, which is kind of cool. It's white paper paint. You paint it on a wall, you let it sit for 7 days, and it becomes a whiteboard. Only problem with it is that they're not magnetic necessarily. I like magnetic whiteboards, so I can actually print a bunch of stuff out, put it up on the walls, write a bunch of notes, take it down, put a bunch of other stuff up, take a bunch of notes, and continue on. But it still kind of shocks me after 20 years of being in this business. If you go to like BMW, or if you go to all the other industries, their main design teams, this has been around for hundreds of years. They don't have this notion of like sitting at desks and putting headphones on and like typing. A lot of their work is done out in the open, and they build stuff, they make things, they have these shops, and so you guys have to like implement that in the Valley as far as I'm concerned. So you're the start. You guys have to all start the culture. But you have to build a collaborative design environment. The space around the people actually has to be conducive to them working together, not separately. And don't fool yourself by thinking that you've got these big open spaces that you've done that. In my opinion, you're only about halfway there. This is finally becoming more, I think, mainstream, which is good. A couple of years ago, it's been a kind of a struggle for a lot of tech companies. But the design team actually needs to be on source control, not just the engineering team. And so Versions is a great product from the Sofa guys. Facebook bought them, but I think they're still operating on their own, which is good. Source control does a bunch of stuff. It enables your teams to truly work together, which is probably the biggest thing, especially when you got remote teams. We've got some guys in London. We've got some guys in New York. We're going to be putting people in Japan. They're time shifted. When all the designers are checking in Photoshop files and mock-ups and Illustrator files and the research papers and all that kind of stuff, everybody else around the entire planet can grab them as well too. We built our own tools now off of that, so we can actually do design reviews off of those things, and whatnot. And finally, when people lose machines, which happens unfortunately more often than it needs to, they don't lose the work. You'd be surprised that I've walked into some big companies before, where when I was working with the design team, first question out of my head is usually, okay, let's get started. Where's the logo? Somebody would email it to me. Like, that's crazy. You're going to email me the logo? Really? What's wrong with that? Like, don't you have like a server, a source control? Like, then they have a server, but the server's a mess and there's nothing there and whatnot. Some designers have a hard time with this one, in my experience. Younger ones, I think, are getting better at this. Some of the older ones, like me and whatnot, I'm having to break them of the worst habit trying to get designers into source control, which is, I'm not done yet. You guys ever hear that from a designer? Like, if you ever have source controls, like, they don't want to check it in because they're not done yet. It's like, I don't care. I get that you're not done. Check it in anyway. We all understand that you're not done, but people are going to look at it. It's like, yeah, that's the point. We want to see it now, not later. We got to get people in the habit of checking in, just like engineers, 3 times a day, morning, noon, right before you go home. Hopefully at night sometimes if you're working really hard. So source control for a design team and a design environment is massively critical, and a lot of people are getting on that bandwagon, which is good. I've been doing this now at Yahoo. We're doing it at Twitter now. I did it at my studio for a little bit as well too. I didn't do it at Adobe. This was one of the lessons I learned from Adobe, that how to get going in this. A lot of people do this now, which I think is great. Be very specific about it though. You have to make design reviews a safe space for honesty. Without critique, there can be little design growth. What I tend to do, so at Twitter, every Thursday, we have a 2.5-hour block of time, blocked everybody's calendar. We all get together, just the designers get together in a room. We look at all the work, people are scheduled. 10, 15-minute blocks. You got to kind of move fast with it. Only the designers are sitting there, and they all give you their feedback and whatnot. Does a couple of things. One is everybody can see what's going on, which is good. More importantly, though, there's no other folks in the room. There's no engineers in the room. There's no product people in the room. It's not like we don't like you. It's not like we don't love you. But when we're kind of grilling each other, I don't want people to feel like they're being thrown under the bus in front of, other folks. Especially with minutia details like, the leading value used is different than the one you used over here, right? It's like stuff like that. Or that version of pink is really atrocious. What were you thinking? So making a space for your designers and your design team, or if you're going to be doing this, to give them a chance to have a tribe. They need to collaborate with everybody. It's important. Designers work with engineers. They're all embedded together. All that's important. But what I've also found is that you still need to give space for the team to actually work as a design team so they can kind of, be critical of each other and whatnot. If you can find a way to do that where you have other folks in the room, I would love to hear how that goes, because every time I've tried it, it's been a disaster, usually with tears involved. I've known some pretty harsh engineers in my day. Most engineers don't hold back. So this is a big deal for the collaboration side of the fence, and it builds morale. People can get going, and it's really good. So those are the three main lessons for collaboration that I've kind of learned that I feel hold true for a while. This one's going to sound counterintuitive to some of you. Maybe it doesn't sound counterintuitive. Whenever I usually say this to designers, they look at me like I'm crazy. But it's standardizing. And what I mean by that is that you kind of need to standardize your team's tools. Shared tools create shared files, which creates shared work. You combine that with source control and subversion, a lot of stuff starts to happen. Now, this can be very contentious, and I've done it a couple of times. I feel like I'm a little bit special, and then I get away with something because, my job for 15 years was knowing every creative tool on the planet. I could, use CorelDRAW, I can use Quark Express, I can use Freehand, I can use Illustrator, I can deal with fireworks. You can throw any product you want at me and I can use it. So that was my job. I had to actually know how to use all of those things to do the work on Illustrator and Photoshop properly. So for me, I actually don't care what tool it is. For me, at the end of the day, all these things are just tools. Photoshop is not a creative magic product. It's a pretty crappy painting product, quite frankly. It's just a tool. It's just something you do the work in. It's not the work. However, when I get on a team, the first thing I do is I make them pick one tool. I don't care which pixel editor you pick. You can pick Photoshop, Fireworks. If you pick CorelDRAW, I think you're nuts. And definitely not Balsamic. But pick a tool. And usually there's the war. You suddenly get the Fireworks guys and the Photoshop guys, and then there's something going on. It's like who ultimately, sometimes it usually winds up being Photoshop for a variety of reasons. The important part here is that they all have to use the same tool, because when they start doing work that actually does go to more the production side of the fence, they need to be able to share the work. It just seems like common sense. Text is different for code. I mean, lots of engineers can use different text editors. At the end of the day, though, it's still text and it's still ASCII. This notion for a design team is pretty much the same as, are your tabs indented by 3 or 5 spaces? It's kind of like the same thing. And it's not about Photoshop or the one tool. What it is for me is that once the competency level of the entire team is equivalent for the tool, then you can add a second tool if they all want. Then you get competency level for there. Then you can add a third tool. But when you have disparate skill sets, disparate people, the rock star that works in After Effects, and then the guy over here that can make Illustrator do amazing stuff, but nobody else can do it. They're siloed. They can't share work. They become more siloed in their process and their design thinking. And then if they decide to go join another company, you're screwed. So getting the team to actually agree to standardize on a tool set is quite a big deal, and it usually will cause lots of contention. But every time I've done it, after the 3 months of pain, amazing stuff happens. And one of the most amazing things that happens, by the way, is that all your really good designers who are good at After Effects will show the other ones how to use it, and they become mentors and they share knowledge, and all the ones that have potential suddenly become really good, because now they're all working at a nice level. So as I just mentioned, only add tools after mastery of an existing tool. Disparate skill sets create uneven results when you're talking about larger teams and whatnot. Structure. This next point. So, as Jason had mentioned, there's process to design. There's always a process. I have never been, I'd like to think I've never been a process wonk. And I don't like capital P process. I tend to think of it more as structure, as I like to say these days. To me, structure is like a skeleton. It provides a good foundation for what you do. So all the things you want to do in a design process for a team is not that you do step A, then you do step B, then you do step C, or if you do step A and this happens, you go to step 4, and then if step 4 doesn't happen, you go to step Z. None of that kind of capital P process stuff. No, not about waterfall and agile specifically. It's about structure. It's about setting up the team to give them the ability to work and do the jobs that they're really good at, which is being designers. So all the things I just mentioned to you just a second ago, collaboration, pictures, standardization and whatnot, those are things that help make structure for a design team and allow them to work. I'm going to skip that one for a second. So I'm a big sports guy. I'm a huge football fan. And I like to use, this by the way, didn't go over very well in Holland because American football didn't make sense to them, but hopefully it'll make sense to you guys. To me, a good structure and the way you organize the team and let them work is like a good playbook. It provides just enough foundation, but allows your team to be able to call audibles. And so the example basically is that, Peyton Manning, for example, he's brilliant at this. Colts have a playbook, they get a play. Peyton Manning's like getting directions from the coaches on the sideline. He's helping pick the plays. Like, I think this is the play we're going to do. Calls the play in the huddle, walks up to the line, and suddenly realizes that the play he just called in the huddle is going to fail because there's these big linebackers, sitting in a spot where we're going to pummel him. So he steps back for a second and he calls an audible. Coaches can't do that. He has to do that. He has enough of a playbook and enough of a skill set going on that he can call the audible. So to me, everything you do in a design team, in an organization, has to be that when a designer is facing a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning because they're working late, and they have enough structure in place where they can actually make a change and it's going to work. It's not like they have to go talk to somebody and get approval or whatnot. You have to set up the whole environment so that they can pull it off, or your engineers, or your product people, or anybody on the team that's actually affecting the design of the product itself, the direction it goes. So everything I try to do is an attempt to create a playbook for the team. I give them heuristics and rules. I give them all kinds of means and tools to do that with, but I don't tell them to make that red or to make the feature do this or any of that kind of stuff. I want them to work that out with their coworkers. There's a lot of tricks to that, and it takes time. And I feel like I'm just now starting to get a sense of how to do that better. And I generally can answer this question a lot better. I can answer this a lot better when you ask me a specific question about how I would handle it. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to set up process, in my opinion, especially for design teams. You want to set up a structure. Give them an environment and give them some rules, and then actually let them call the play. And just like the Peyton Manning example, if they call the wrong audible, they're going to get hit hard. And then they'll learn not to do that again. And then the final one, which is finally coming into play in the Valley, which is so good that this is hopefully not a question anymore, is prototyping. Good Lord, during the aughts, I couldn't stand all the discussions about designers whining about not wanting to learn how to prototype or build things. I feel like these days, hopefully, that's kind of getting beyond us now finally. The tools have gotten a lot better. The technology stack has gotten a lot easier to do this. And it's not about building like, production level front-end code that can scale, that can be delivered across a mobile pipeline, any of that stuff. It's just about building something. Something that gives you a sense of what you're going to do. Even after all this time, I've been designing software for 22 years now. Even after all this time, whenever I draw something or whenever I have an idea about how it's going to be, I'm always shocked and amazed at myself that how bad it was when I actually built it. I have no idea if it's going to work, none whatsoever, until I actually build it. And any designer who tells you that they're yes, it's going to work, and they haven't built it, they've only drawn a sketch, is full of shit, straight up. If it does work, they got lucky. And maybe they should go to Vegas or something like that. But it's just not the case. There are so many things going on. There's so many variables going on. You have to build something. Other industries do this. Car companies, fashion designers, Project Runway. I always feel like, it'd be great to have a reality show here in the Valley that's like Project Runway. The problem is trying to find, designers who can actually make their own stuff because in, Project Runway, they sew their own clothes. We need more designers that can actually make things, and that's finally becoming the case. But prototyping is just the way it is. And we're doing that at Twitter now. We did that at Yahoo, started building a lot of the front end, folding more designers or more front end type people who have front end sensibilities, who train the designers and teach the designers. HTML, CSS is not rocket science, it can be done. This guy here got me started on it 13 years ago. It just, it's just like anything, it just takes practice. If you want to learn to play the guitar, you got to practice. You got to practice, you got to get your hands until they can feel the strings and they get the notes properly. But you can't make music until you get that part down. And so prototyping is like that for us in design. You got to build something. So I don't feel like that one's too contentious, but definitely one of the big things. So that's just kind of like a high level concept of pieces. Just want to give you a sense of that stuff. Thank you. Thanks.